Chapter 16 of Maglin. Eredhel Arfanel, the White Lady of the Noldor, daughter of Finghalfin, dwelt in Nevrast with Turgon her brother, and she went with him to the Hidden Kingdom. But she wearied of the guarded city of Gondolin, desiring ever the longer the more to ride again in the wide lands and to walk in the forests, as had been her wont in Valinor. And when 200 years had passed since Gondolin was full wrought, she spoke to Turgon and asked leave to depart. Turgon was loath to grant this, and long denied her, but at the last he yielded, saying, "Go then, if you will, though it is against my wisdom, and I forebode that ill will come of it both to you and to me. But you shall go only to seek Fingon, our brother, and those that I send with you shall return hither to Gondolin as swiftly as they may." But Eredhel said, "I am your sister and not your servant, and beyond your bounds I will go as seems good to me. And if you begrudge me an escort, then I will go it alone." Then Turgon answered, "I grudge you nothing that I have. Yet I desire that none shall dwell beyond my walls who know the way hither, and if I trust you, my sister, others I trust less to keep guard on their tongues." And Turgon appointed 3 lords of his household to ride with Eredhel, and he bade them lead her to Fingon and Hethelam, if they might prevail upon her. "And be wary," he said, "for the Morgoth be yet emmed in the north there are many perils in Middle-earth of which the lady knows nothing." Then Eredhel departed from Gondolin, and Turgon's heart was heavy at her going. But when she came to the ford of Brithiac in the river Sirion she said to her companions, "Turn now south and not north, for I will not ride to Hethelam, my heart desires rather to find the sons of Fëanor, my friends of old." And since she could not be dissuaded they turned south as she commanded, and sought admittance into Doriath. But the March Wardens denied him, for Thingol would suffer none of the Noldor to pass the girdle, save his kinsfolk of the house of Finarfin, and least of all those that were friends of the sons of Fëanor. Therefore the March Wardens said to Eredhel, "To the land of Celegorum for which ye seek, lady, you may by no means pass through the realm of King Thingol, you must ride beyond the girdle of Melian, to the south or to the north. The speediest way is by the paths that lead east from the Brithiac through Damar along the north march of this kingdom, until you pass the bridge of Isgaldin and the fords of Eros, and come to the lands that lie behind the hill of Himring. There dwell, as we believe, Celegorum and Crufin, and it may be that you will find them, but the road is perilous." Then Eredhel turned back and sought the dangerous road between the haunted valleys of Edgorgoroth and the north fences of Doriath, and as they drew near to the evil region of Nandungarthad the riders became enmeshed in shadows, and Eredhel strayed from her companions and was lost. They sought long for her in vain, fearing that she had been ensnared, or had drunk from the poisoned streams of that land, but the fell creatures of Ungoliant that dwelt in the ravines were aroused and pursued him, and they hardly escaped with their lives. When at last they returned and their tale was told there was great sorrow in Gondolin, and Turgon sat long alone, enduring grief and anger in silence. But Eredhel, having sought in vain for her companions, rode on, for she was fearless and hardy of heart, as were all the children of Finwë, and she held on her way, and crossing Isgaldin and Eros came to the land of Imlad between Eros and Sullen where Celegorum and Crufin dwelled in those days, before the breaking of the siege of Angband. At that time they were from home, riding with Caranthur, east, in, Tharjurlion, but the people of Celegorum welcomed her and bade her stay among them with honor until their lord's return. There for a while she was content, and had great joy in wandering free in the woodlands, but as the year lengthened and Celegorum did not return, she became restless again, and took to riding alone ever further abroad, seeking for new paths in untrodden glades. Thus it chanced in the waning of the year that Eredhel came to the south of Imlad, and passed over Selen, and before she was aware she was enmeshed in Nan-Elmith. And that when in ages past Melian walked in the twilight of Middle-earth when the trees were young, and enchantment lay upon it still. But now the trees of Nan-Elmith were the tallest and darkest in all Beleriand, and there the sun never came, and there Eald dwelt, who was named the Dark Elf. Of old he was of the kin of Thingol, but he was restless and ill at ease in Doriath, and when the girdle of Melian was set about the forest of Regent where he dwelled he fled thence to Nan-Elmith. There he lived in deep shadow, loving the night and the twilight under the stars. He shunned the Noldor, holding them to blame for the return of Morgoth, to trouble the quiet of Beleriand, but for the dwarves he had more liking than any other of the elven folk of old. From him the dwarves learned much of what passed in the lands of the Eldar. Now the traffic of the dwarves down from the Blue Mountains followed 2 roads across East Beleriand, and the northern way, going towards the fords of Eros, past Night and on Elmouth, and there Eorl would meet the Nogrim and hold converse with them. And as their friendship grew he would at times go and dwell as guest in the deep mansions of Nogrador Belagast. There he learned much of metal work, and came to great skill therein, and he devised a metal as hard as the steel of the dwarves, but so malleable that he could make it thin and supple, and yet it remained resistant to all blades and darts. He named it Galvorn, for it was black and shining like jet, and he was clad in it whenever he went abroad. But Eorl, though stooped by his smith work, was no dwarf, but a tall elf of a high kin of the JRR, noble though grim of face, and his eyes could see deep into shadows and dark places. And it came to pass that he saw Eredhel Arfenal as she strayed among the tall trees near the borders of Non Elmouth, a gleam of white in the dim land. Very fair she seemed to him, and he desired her, and he set his enchantments about her so that she could not find the ways out, but drew ever nearer to his dwelling in the depths of the wood. There were his smithy, and his dumb halls, and such servants as he had, silent and secret as their master. And when Eredhel, weary with wandering, came at last to his doors, he revealed himself, and he welcomed her, and led her into his house. And there she remained, for Eorl took her to wife, and it was long ere any of her kin heard of her again. It is not said that Eredhel was wholly unwilling, nor that her life in Nan Elmouth was hateful to her for many years. For though at Eorl's command she must shun the sunlight, they wandered far together under the stars or by the light of the sickle moon, or she might fare alone as she would, save that Eorl forbade her to seek the sons of Fëanor, or any others of the Noldor. And Eredhel bore to Eorl a son in the shadows of Non Elmouth, and in her heart she gave him a name in the forbidden tongue of the Noldor, Lamian, that signifies child of the twilight, but his father gave him no name until he was 12 years old. Then he called him Maglin, which is sharp glance, for he perceived that the eyes of his son were more piercing than his own, and his thought could read the secrets of hearts beyond the mist of words. As Maglin grew to full stature he resembled in face and form rather his kindred of the Noldor, but in mood and mind he was the son of his father. His words were few save in matters that touched him near, and then his voice had a power to move those that heard him and to overthrow those that withstood him. He was tall and black-haired, his eyes were dark, yet bright and keen as the eyes of the Noldor, and his skin was white. Often he went with Eorl to the cities of the dwarves in the east of Erdlinden, and there he learned eagerly what they would teach, and above all the craft of finding the ores of metals in the mountains. Yet it is said that Maglin loved his mother better, and if Eorl were abroad he would sit long beside her and listen to all that she could tell him and her kin and their deeds in Eldamar, and of the might and valor of the princes of the house of Fingolfin. All these things he laid to heart, but most of all that which he heard of Turgon, and that he had no heir, for Elenwe his wife perished in the crossing of the Helcarax, and his daughter Idril Celebrindle was his only child. In the telling of these tales there was awakened in Eredhel a desire to see her own kin again, and she marveled that she had grown weary of the light of Gondolin, and the fountains in the sun, and the green sward of Tumladen under the windy skies of spring. Moreover she was often alone in the shadows when both her son and her husband were away. Of these tales also grew the first quarrels of Maglin and Eorl. For by no means would his mother reveal to Maglin where Turgon dwelt, nor by what means one might come thither, and he bided his time, trusting yet to wheedle the secret from her, or perhaps to read her unguarded mind. But ere that could be done he desired to look on the Noldor and speak with the sons of Fëanor, his kin, that dwelt not far away. But when he declared his purpose to Eorl, his father was wrathful. "You are of the house of Eorl, Maglin, my son," he said, "and not of the Gilladrim. All this land is the land of the Tel'arai, and I will not deal nor have my son deal with the slayers of our kin, the invaders and usurpers of our homes. In this you shall obey me, or I will set you in bonds." And Maglin did not answer, but was cold and silent, and went abroad no more with Eorl, and Eorl mistrusted him. It came to pass that at the midsummer the dwarves, as was their custom, bade Eorl to a feast in Nograd, and he rode away. Now Maglin and his mother were free for a while to go where they wished, and they rode off into the eaves of the wood, seeking the sunlight, and desire grew on him Maglin's heart to leave Nan Elmouth forever. Therefore he said to Eredhel, "Lady, let us depart while there is time. What hope is there in this wood for you or for me? Here we are held in bandage, and no profit shall I find here, for I have learned all that my father has to teach, or that the Nogrim will reveal to me. Shall we not seek for Gondolin? You shall be my guide, and I will be your guard." Then Eredhel was glad, and looked with pride upon her son, and telling the servants of Eol that they went to seek the sons of Fionn, they departed and rode away to the northeast of Nan Elmith. There they crossed the slender stream of Selin into the land of Himlad and rode on to the fords of Eros, and so westward along the fences of Doriath. Now Eol returned out of the east sooner than Maglin had foreseen, and found his wife and his son but 2 days gone, and so great was his anger that he followed after them even by the light of day. As he entered the Himlad he mastered his wrath and went warily, remembering his danger, for Selagoram and Crufin were mighty lords who loved Eol not at all, and Crufin moreover was of perilous mood. But the scouts of England had marked the riding of Maglin and dared held to the fords of Eros, and Crufin perceiving that strange steeds were afoot came south from the pass and encamped near the fords. And before Eol had ridden far across the Himlad he was waylaid by the riders of Crufin, and taken to their lord. Then Crufin said to Eol, "What errand have you, dark elf, in my lands? An urgent matter, perhaps, that keeps one so sun-shy abroad by day." And Eol, knowing his peril, restrained the bitter words that arose in his mind. "I have learned, Lord Crufin," he said, "that my son and my wife, the White Lady of Gondolin, have ridden to visit you while I was from home, and it seemed to me fitting that I should join them on this errand." Then Crufin laughed at Eol, and he said, "They might have found their welcome here less warm than they hoped, had you accompanied them, but it is no matter, for that was not their errand. It is not 2 days since they passed over the Erisiach, and thence rode swiftly westward. It seems that you will deceive me, unless indeed you yourself have been deceived." And Eol answered, "Then, Lord, perhaps you will give me leave to go, and discover the truth of this matter." "You have my leave, but not my love," said Crufin. "The sooner you depart from my land the better will it please me." Then Eol mounted his horse, saying, "It is good, Lord Crufin, to find a kinsman thus kindly at need. I will remember it when I return." Then Crufin looked darkly upon Eol. "Do not flaunt the title of your wife before me," he said. "For those who steal the daughters of the Noldor and wed them without gift or leave do not gain kinship with their kin. I have given you leave to go. Take it, and be gone. By the laws of the Eldar I may not slay you at this time. And this counsel I add, return now to your dwelling in the darkness of Non Elmouth, for my heart warns me that if you now pursue those who love you no more, never will you return thither." Then Eol rode off in haste, and he was filled with hatred of all the Noldor, for he perceived now that Maglin and Eredhel were fleeing to Gondolin. And driven by anger and the shame of his humiliation he crossed the fords of Eros and rode hard upon the way that they had gone before, but though they knew not that he followed them, and he had the swiftest steed, he came never in sight of them until they reached the Brithiac, and abandoned their horses. Then by ill fate they were betrayed, for the horses neighed loudly, and Eol's steed heard him, and sped towards them, and Eol saw from afar the white raiment of Eredhel, and marked which way she went, seeking the secret path into the mountains. Now Eredhel and Maglin came to the outer gate of Gondolin in the dark garden under the mountains, and there she was received with joy, and passing through the 7 gates she came with Maglin to Turgon upon Amangwerth. Then the king listened with wonder to all that Eredhel had to tell, and he looked with liking upon Maglin his sister son, seeing in him one worthy to be accounted among the princes of the Noldor. "I rejoice indeed that our Fainel has returned to Gondolin," he said, "and now more fair again shall my city seem than in the days when I deemed her lost, and Maglin shall have the highest honor in my realm." Then Maglin bowed low and took Turgon for lord and king, to do all his will, but thereafter he stood silent and watchful, for the bliss and splendor of Gondolin surpassed all that he had imagined from the tales of his mother, and he was amazed by the strength of the city and the hosts of its people, and the many things strange and beautiful that he beheld. Yet to none were his eyes more often drawn than to Idril the king's daughter, who sat beside him, for she was golden as the Vaniar, her mother's kindred, and she seemed to him as the sun from which all the king's hall drew its light. But Eol, following after Eredhel, found the dry river in the secret path, and so creeping in by stealth he came to the guard, and was taken and questioned. And when the guard heard that he claimed Eredhel as wife they were amazed, and sent a swift messenger to the city, and he came to the king's hall. "Lord," he cried, "the guard hath taken captive one that came by stealth to the dark gate. Eol he names himself, and he is a tall elf, dark and grim, of the kindred of the Sinar, yet he claims the lady Eredhel as his wife, and demands to be brought before you. His wrath is great and he is hard to restrain, but we have not slain him as your law commands." Then Eredhel said, "Alas! Eol has followed us, even as I feared. but with great stealth was it done, for we saw and heard no pursuit as we entered upon the hidden way. Then she said to the messenger, "He speaks but the truth. He is Eall, and I am his wife, and he is the father of my son. Slay him not, but lead him hither to the king's judgment, if the king so wills." And so it was done, and Eall was brought into Turgon's hall and stood before his high seat, proud and sullen. Though he was amazed no less than her son at all that he saw, his heart was filled the more with anger and with hate of the Noldor. But Turgon treated him with honor, and rose up and would take his hand, and he said, "Welcome, kinsman, for so I hold you. Here you shall dwell at your pleasure, save only that you must here abide and depart not from my kingdom, for it is my law that none who finds a way hither shall depart." But Eall withdrew his hand. "I acknowledge not your law," he said. "No right of you or any of your kin in this land to seize realms or to set bounds, either here or there. This is the land of the JRR, to which ye bring war and unquiet, dealing ever proudly and unjustly. I care nothing for your secrets, and I came not to spy upon you, but to claim my own, my wife and my son. Yet if in Eredhel your sister you have some claim, then let her remain, let the bird go back to the cage, where soon she will sicken again, as she sickened before. But not so Maglin. My son you shall not withhold from me. Come, Maglin son of Eall. Your father commands you. Leave the house of his enemies and the slayers of his kin, or be cursed." But Maglin answered nothing. Then Turgon sat in his high seat holding his staff of doom, and in a stern voice spoke, "I will not debate with you, dark elf. By the swords of the Noldor alone are your sunless woods defended. Your freedom to wander there wild you owe to my kin, and but for them long since you would have labored in thraldom in the pits of Angband. And here I am king, and whether you will it or will it not, my doom is law. This choice only is given to you, to abide here, or to die here, and so also for your son." Then Eall looked into the eyes of King Turgon, and he was not daunted, but stood long without word or movement while a still silence fell upon the hall, and Eredhel was afraid, knowing that he was perilous. Suddenly, swift as serpent, he seized a javelin that he held hid beneath his cloak and cast it at Maglin, crying, "The second choice I taken from my son also. You shall not hold what is mine." But Eredhel sprang before the dart, and it smote her in the shoulder, and Eall was overborne by many and set in bonds, and led away, while others tended Eredhel. But Maglin looking upon his father was silent. It was appointed that Eall should be brought on the next day to the king's judgment, and Eredhel did remove Turgon to mercy. But in the evening Eredhel sickened, though the wound did seem little, and she fell into the darkness, and in the night she died, for the point of the javelin was poisoned, though none knew it until too late. Therefore when Eall was brought before Turgon they found no mercy, and they led him forth to the Cirag door, a precipice of black rock upon the north side of the hill of Gondolin, there to cast him down from the sheer walls of the city. And Maglin stood by and said nothing, but at the last Eall cried out, "So you forsake your father and his kin, ill-gotten son! Here shall you fail of all your hopes, and here may you yet die the same death as I." Then they cast Eall over the Cirag door, and so he ended, and to all in Gondolin it seemed just, but Idril was troubled, and from that day she mistrusted her kinsman. But Maglin prospered and grew great among the Gondolindrim, praised by all, and high in the favor of Turgon, for if he would learn eagerly and swiftly all that he might, he had much also to teach. And he gathered about him all such as had the most bent to smithcraft and mining, and he sought in the Echo Riath, which are the encircling mountains, and found rich lodes of ore of divers metals. Most he prized the hard iron of the mine of Angabar in the north of the Echo Riath, and thence he got a wealth of forged metal and of steel, so that the arms of the Gondolindrim were made ever stronger and more keen, and that stood them in good stead in the days to come. Wise in counsel was Maglin and wary, and yet hardy and valiant at need. And that was seen in after days, for when in the dread year of the Nidneth Arnodiad Turgon opened his leaguer and marched forth to the help of Fingon in the north, Maglin would not remain in Gondolin as regent of the king, but went to the war and fought beside Turgon, and proved fell and fearless in battle. Thus all seemed woe with the fortunes of Maglin, who had risen to be mighty among the princes of the Noldor, and greatest save one in the most renowned of their realms. Yet he did not reveal his heart, and though not all things went as he would, he endured it in silence, hiding his mind so that few can read it, unless it were Idril Celebrindle. For from his first days in Gondolin he had borne a grief, ever worsening, that robbed him of all joy. He loved the beauty of Idril and desired her, without hope. The Eldar wedded not with kin so near, nor ever before had any desire to do so. And however that might be, Idril loved Maglin not at all, and knowing this thought of her she loved him the less. For it seemed to her thing strange and crooked in him, as indeed the Eldar ever since have deemed it, an evil fruit of the kinslaying, whereby the shadow of the curse of Mandus fell upon the last hop of the Noldor. But as the years passed still Maglin watched Idril, and waited, and his love turned to darkness in his heart. And he sought the more to have his will in other matters, shirking no toil or burden, if he might thereby have power. Thus it was in Gondolin, and amid all the bliss of that realm, while its glory lasted, a dark seed of evil was sown,